tax is popular. I think there's a reality check that says, look, you go around the rest of the Northeast, it's there.
That was Oz Griebel at the big gubernatorial debate at UConn, seen right here on WFSB Wednesday night. And with us right now, making their debut as political analysts, we have David Stemmerman, former candidate for governor, a Republican, also a former candidate for governor, Mayor Joe Ganim, a Democrat. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
Well, let's begin, first of all, with just, you both lost the primaries, and now you're friendly with the people who did win, which is to be expected in politics. But as you watched the debate, did you think, what would I have done differently? I'll begin with you, Mr. Stemmerman.
I'm happy that we've got a nominee that's going to represent our party well, and so I was there to cheer him on and to make sure that the message that he's articulating, which is we can't have a third term of Dan Malloy and our state needs to move forward with change and new leadership. I was pleased with him delivering that message and happy to have him there.
You were a very feisty debater, Mayor Ganim. Do you think that Mr. Lamont needs to step it up and be more feisty?
No, I think he's hit his stride really in a lot of ways. I think he's talking to Connecticut, he's talking to voters. Clearly, he's articulated a message that's, look, I want to fix this mess. I'm practical. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get it done. I'm not going to give you pie in the sky. I'm going to do away with the income tax or anything like that. But he's also very conscious of taxpayers, the needs we have in Connecticut. So I was very impressed.
We used some sound with Oz Griebel because this was a different debate because it's the first time that three candidates were on stage. Oz Griebel is a former Republican who ran for governor back in 2010, decided to go unaffiliated this time around. Is he a factor at all, do you think, Mr. Stemmerman?
I don't. I think his poll results are sub 5%, and while it was kind of you to give him a podium, this election really is a two-way race between Bob and Ned, and I think that's really where the focus and attention should be.
He scored 4% in the most recent poll with the margin of error, and our threshold was 5%, which is why we did include him. Do you think that if he takes votes from anybody, who is it?
Well, he's a much more practical Republican, frankly. He talks about, he doesn't come in with the extreme kind of perspective, again, of trying to, which unrealistically, to try to eliminate the income tax. So I think he should be on the stage. I think he should be heard. He's got a lot of credibility, and he can talk the talk well and leave it up to the voters.
You both were very critical of the people you are now supporting. So I need to bring this back. And number one, you used to, Mayor Ganim, you would criticize Ned Lamont's money, saying that he was out of touch. What do you think now?
I think there has been demonstrated to me. Well, yeah, I think clearly if you watch that debate or the series of debates and his personal appearances, which he is everywhere, talking to people. He's talking about things we talked about in that primary. He's talking about the needs of cities, at the same time, the needs of people in cities and towns all over Connecticut. Not cutting education, but supporting good quality public education, supporting things like access to good quality health care and fighting for and preserving the Affordable Care Act and all the things that we need to do in Connecticut. So yes, I think this is a time when voters need to focus in, and I think when they take a good hard look at Ned Lamont, they're going to like what they see.
And Mr. Stemmerman, you were very critical of Mr. Stefanowski's plan to eliminate the income tax. You said it just was not feasible, cannot be done. And now you're on his team. Can it still not be done? Is it still impossible?
I think one of the key questions for the people of Connecticut is, as we are facing this massive budget crisis, as we're facing a deteriorating economy, do you want to stay in the same direction, which is what Ned Lamont would do, or do you want to change? And the other key question for people, when I went all around the states and I said, how do you think we're doing here in Connecticut? And people would say, not so good, or they'd start laughing, saying, you're not really asking me that question. I said, well, why do you feel so bad? And they said, well, because my taxes are too high and I can't afford to stay in my house. I'm literally being forced out of my home. And so you have a clear choice. What's going to happen after this election? We have this massive budget deficit. If Ned is elected, he's going to do the same thing as Dan Malloy. He's going to raise your taxes. If Bob is elected, he's going to cut your taxes. I think it's a very simple, straightforward decision for the voters. And I think that's why Bob is going to be our next governor.
But your tax ideas were different. Do you think he can actually eliminate the income tax?
I think that he is committed to reducing the size of government, reducing spending, and then giving tax cuts across the board, which is critical. It's critical to provide relief to people. When I went all over the state, and I went from the VJ Day parade in Moosip to the Puerto Rican Day parade in Bridgeport, everybody was saying to me, I love this state and I would love to stay here, but I'm literally being forced out of my home because my taxes keep going up, the cost of living is too high, I need tax relief. That's a central issue for this next election, and Bob is going to cut your taxes, Ned is going to raise them. That's the signal issue for this next election.
Not really. I mean, it makes nice sound bites, but at the end of the day, and I'm mayor of the largest city, I understand the challenges of high taxes, especially property taxes. And what Ned Lamont's talking about, and he'll have the support, I hope, from both a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House in Connecticut, is finally to put front and center the most regressive tax that we have that's causing the divide that I talked about in Connecticut, high property taxes in communities that can't afford it. And then and the over-reliance on that for public education. When you look at those two things, that's really where the difference and the challenges need to be made in Connecticut, and that's what he's talking about. Look, this is not the first time a Republican candidate, has talked about eliminating the income tax. It's kind of that recycled thing that sounds good right about now in October as you head towards November. Once you get into January, after they raise the right hand, they find out, well, you know what, that really can't be done. Or the attempts will do it, will devastate cities and towns and any small aid that they continue to get.
Both of you have differences.
If I could just follow up on
wait right now.
Just so, on this point on tax cuts, this was one of the points I thought Bob made very clearly in the election, is that you began with Ned starting the campaign saying, I'm going to raise your taxes. But now he's saying, I'm going to cut your taxes. And so the debate has now moved on, should we be raising taxes or cutting taxes? And so if you want somebody who's going to cut taxes, do you want the real guy who's going to cut taxes? Do you want some guy who keeps shifting his plan and say, maybe I'll cut taxes here, maybe I'll cut taxes there? Our former Senator Joe Lieberman said Republicans were put on this planet to cut taxes and cut regulations. And so if that's what we need in this state, which I think it is, why not get the real thing?
We're going to take a quick commercial timeout. More with Joe Ganim and David Stemmerman when we come back.